Alright, so I'm beginning work on the center section bulkheads, which comes after the firewall on the plans. First thing you need to do is to drill holes for snap bushings. Now on the pieces that go on the side here, it's pretty obvious. They have a pilot hole where you're supposed to enlarge for these snap bushings. But on these center section spars, there are no pilot holes. You have to measure from the plans. Now the plans say, they give you marks on the one bulkhead using these holes as a reference. You measure off of this hole, and you measure off of this hole. You measure off of this hole to get your height, and then you can measure off of this hole to get your distance over to mark your lines. That in itself is tedious. It gets worse when you go to the other bulkhead spar section, because you have rivets here, domed rivets, and there isn't anything to reference off of. So what I had done, I went ahead and laid this one out first. This is the forward center section bulkhead. I measured this out using the plans, and then I basically verified that this is in fact the center from one end to the other, the length of the bulkhead, that this is center. And I went ahead and I found center on this bulkhead, which is represented by this line here, and then I just measured the distance that my marks make, and I believe these are 1 7/8 apart. And then I just transferred that off of my line here, make sure that these are 1 7/8, and this is my center line. And then I went ahead and I measured from this face out to this mark, and then I did the same thing here. I measured from this face out to get this mark. So that's how I had done it on this back spar. I laid everything out initially on this front spar, and then I went ahead and basically transferred those dimensions onto this spar. So the next step is to install these side pieces here onto the center section bulkhead spar things, which is what I'm doing now. The instructions say that you should put these tight tolerance bolts in at least 2 locations, one on the top and one on the bottom, to orient this plate perfectly, and then cleco it, and then match drill it. So I've went ahead and installed all 4 bolts just cause. I've got 4 on this side, and I've got the 4 on this side, these here, and I got clecos in, and I just finished drilling. So I've done this bulkhead completely with the match drilling. I'm going to clean everything up, take the clecos out, take these bolts out, and then I'll go ahead and put them on this bulkhead and do the exact same thing. So I'll run the close tolerance bolts 1, 2, 3, 4 on this end, and down there at that end, cleco everything and match drill it. And then I'm going to do, well, I'll get to that. Let me get these in and drilled on this bulkhead, and I'll come back and talk about what's next. I've got all of these side pieces have been put on temporarily with the bolts and the clecos, and they've been match drilled to the I still don't know what to call these, bulkheads, and everything has been deburred, both on the bulkhead spar and on the uprights, both front and rear bulkheads. So this back bulkhead gets these blocks, these nicely machined gold anodized blocks. These go in at an angle, and they only go on one side one way, so you can't get them wrong, so to speak. They've been pre-drilled at the factory, and they only go on one location. If they don't fit this way, you have to flip them over. But you'll see when you go to put the bolts in that the holes won't line up if you have them in the wrong spot. So all I did was put the bolts in, and like I usually do, I came in from this side. This is pre-drilled. The blocks have no drill holes in them except for these two bolts. So once the blocks are in, the bolts are in, I use the pre-punched hole on this piece to mark the block, just like you see here. Did that on both sides, just like I always do. And I don't want to drill all the way through. I just want to make an indication on the block. And then I'll take the block and take it over to the drill press and then drill it nice and straight all the way through. I'll bring it back here, put the bolts back in, and then final drill it just to be sure that the holes are straight and that they didn't walk, just to make sure that everything lines up. Oh, and when I do that, so I made the indication here, I'll drill through the heavy block on the drill press. When I bring it back to match drill it, I'll drill through the heavy block into this thinner aluminum here to do the match drilling. That way the block acts as a gauge for to drill through this thinner material, if that makes sense. I've talked about that kind of stuff before, using the thicker material to drill through into the thin material. If you do it backwards, if you tried it like this, if I tried to drill through this thin aluminum into and through this heavy aluminum block, this hole may get big as the bit walks. So always drill through the thick material into the thin. Like I said, I've talked about that before. So, all right, moving on.